Good morning, everyone. This is Russell Rucker, and I'm here for another constitutional talk. And today, I thought we'd move ahead in Federalist and go on to number 5. And the interesting thing here on 5 is we're back to talking about union. This is J, our future Supreme Court Justice, writing in New York to the people of New York, trying to get the Constitution approved. But what's interesting, I really find here, is the discussion from Queen Anne talking about union. And the case she's discussing is the Union of Great Britain with Scotland, Wales together, and talking about the strength of union. And today, we went through a civil war, we united again, and today there's talks about things like the Greater Idaho, where they want to take in counties from Washington, Oregon, and that, and movements in Maryland to try to join areas with West Virginia. So we're constantly talking about separations. And up in Canada, there's this move by Alberta to join the United States. Whether that will ever come to pass, whether any of these will come to pass, is something we just don't know. But let's get in to Federalist V with John Jay, to the people of the state of New York. Queen Anne, in her letter of the 1st of July, 1706, to the South Parliament, with some observations on the importance of the union then forming between England and Scotland, which merit our attention. I shall present the public with 1 or 2 extracts from it. An entire and perfect union will be the solid foundation of lasting peace. It will secure our religion, liberty, and property, remove the animosities amongst ourselves, and the jealousies and differences betwixt our two kingdoms. It must increase your strength, riches, and trade, and by this union, the whole island being joined in affection and free from all apprehensions of different interest, will be enabled to resist all its enemies. We must earnestly recommend to you calmness and unanimity in this great and weighty affair, that the union may be brought to happy conclusion, being the only effectual way to secure our present and future happiness, and disappoint the designs of our and your enemies, who will doubtless on this occasion use their utmost endeavors to present or delay this union. Now let me stop there for a moment. And they're talking about the strength of this union. And let's not forget, this is July of 1706. And now we're talking in late 1788, 89. So we're talking, a good 80 years later. But the arguments are still the same. It's the strength in union, the ease of defense, all the things that would unite two separate individual lands. So let me continue with J. It was unremarkable in the preceding paper that weakness and divisions at home would invite dangers from abroad, and that nothing would tend more to secure us from them than union, strength, and good government within ourselves. This subject is copious and cannot easily be exhausted. The history of Great Britain is the one with which we are in general the best acquainted. And it gives us many useful lessons. We may profit by their experience without paying the price which it costs them, although it seems obvious to common sense that the people of such an island should be but one nation. Yet we find that there were, for ages, divided into three, and that those three were almost constantly embroiled in quarrels and wars with one another, notwithstanding their true interest with respect to their continental nations, who really the same, yet by the arts and policy and practices of those nations, their mutual jealousies were perpetually kept inflamed, and for a long series of years they were far more inconvenient and troublesome than they were useful and assisting to each other. Now, let me stop for one moment and bring up a little something else. And that is Jay's knowledge of history, Hamilton's knowledge of history, and really the entire population at the time understood Britain and understood their history because they were part of Britain. They were British nationals at one point. They were British subjects to the king, and so they understood this and were well trained and well versed in the discussions of British history, much better than we are today. But let me continue on with Jay. Should the people of America divide themselves into 3 or 4 nations, would not the same thing happen? Would not similar jealousies arise and be in like manner cherished, instead of their being joined in affection and free from all apprehensions of different interests? Envy and jealousy would soon extinguish confidence and adhesion, and the partial interests of each confederacy instead of the general interests of all America would be the only objects of their policy and pursuits. Hence, like most other hardening nations, they would always be either involved in disputes and war or live in the constant apprehension of them. The most sanguine advocates for 3 or 4 confederacies cannot reasonably suppose that they would long remain exactly on an equal footing in points of strength. Even if it were possible to form them so at first, but admittingly that to be practical, yet the human contrivance can secure the continuance of such equality, independent of those local circumstances which tend to beget an increased power in one part and to impede its progress in another. We must advert to the effects of that superior policy and good management which would probably distinguish the government of one above the rest, and by which their relative equality in strength and consideration would be destroyed. For it cannot be presumed that the same degree of sound policy, prudence, and foresight would uniformly be observed by each of those confederacies for a long succession of years. So what Jay is describing here is that if we divided our states into 3 or 4 confederacies, some would become stronger than others. Some would become more important than others by virtue of the strengths of those states. He continues on. Whenever and from whatever causes it might happen, and happen it would, that any one of these nations or confederacy should rise on the scale of political importance much above the degree of her neighbors. That moment would those neighbors behold her with the envy and with fear. Both those passions would lead them to countenance, if not to promote whatever might promise to diminish her importance, and would also restrain them from measures calculated to advance or even to secure her prosperity. Much time would not be necessary to enable her to discern their unfriendly dispositions. She would soon begin not only to lose confidence in her neighbors, but also to feel a disposition equally unfavorable to them. Distrust naturally creates distrust, and by nothing is goodwill and kind conduct more speedily changed than by insidious jealousies and uncanny imputations, whether expressed or implied. The North is generally the region of strength, and many local circumstances render it probable that the most northern of the proposed confederacies would, at a period not very distant, be unquestionably more formidable than any of the others. No sooner would they become evident than the northern hive would excite the same ideas and sensations in the most southern parts of America, which is formerly did in the southern parts of Europe. Nor does it appear to be a rash conjecture that its young swarms might often be tempted to gather honey in the more blooming fields and milder air of other luxurious and more delicate neighbors. They who will consider the history of similar divisions and confederacies will find abundant reason to apprehend that those in the contemplation would in no other sense be neighbors than as they would be borderers, that they would neither love nor trust one another, but on the contrary would be prey to discord, jealousy, and mutual injuries. In short, they would place us exactly in the situations in which some nations doubtless wish to see us, viz., formerly only to each other. From these considerations, it appears that those gentlemen are greatly mistaken who suppose that alliances, offensive and defensive, might be formed between those confederacies and would produce that combination and union of wills, of arms, and of resources which would be necessary to put and keep them as formidable states of defense against foreign enemies. When did the independent states into which Britain and Spain were formerly divided combine in such alliances or unite their forces against a foreign enemy? The proposed confederacies will be distinct nations. Each of them would have its commerce with foreigners to regulate by distinct treaties, and as their productions and commodities are different and proper for different markets, so would those treaties be essentially different. Different commercial concerns must create different interests, and of course different degrees of political attachments to and commercial with different foreign nations. Hence, it might and probably would happen that the foreign nations with whom the Southern Confederacy might be at war would be the one with whom the Northern Confederacy would be the most desirous of preserving peace and friendship. An alliance so contrary to the immediate interest would not therefore be easy to form, nor it formed, would it be observed and fulfilled with perfect good faith? So he's talking about the differences between the North and the South and different confederacies and how they would be different, they would be perceived different, and they would be treated different by other nations of the world. And he continues now, nay, it is far more problematic that in America, as in Europe, neighboring nations acting under the impulse of opposite interests and unfriendly passions would frequently be found taking different sides. Considering our distance from Europe, it would be more natural for these confederacies to apprehend changes from one another than from distant nations, and therefore that each of them should be more desirous to guard against the others by their aid to foreign alliances than to guard against foreign dangers of alliances between themselves. And here, let us not forget how much more easy it is to receive foreign fleets into our ports and foreign armies into our country than it is to perceive or compel them to depart. How many conquerors did the Romans and others make in the character of allies, and what innovations did they under the same character introduce into governments of these whom they pretended to protect? Let candid men judge, then, whether the division of America into any given number of independent sovereignties would tend to secure us against the hostilities and improper interference of foreign nations. And he signs it Publius. Now, he warns us against dividing up. Warns about the weaknesses, about possible, really, wars between the states. Because as you develop into independent confederacies, your issues become different. And one confederacy might become an ally with England, the other France, and maybe another Spain. And that they could draw us into wars. And more importantly, they could draw us into different trading treaties. And this is a problem with dividing up the states. And that one strong confederacy with us all united was better than multiple confederacies. And I think when you look at it this way, it's important to understand the strength of a union where we're all together. Now, in today's day and age, and the country as divided as it is, it's easy to think that we should split up. That states should take other land from other states. All these things weaken us as a country. And I want you to think of that for a moment. Think of how we're stronger together than not. But I think the most important thing out of Federalist V really is what Queen Anne is talking about in her letter, describing the strength of binding up different countries together for the good of the whole. Think about that for a moment, and we'll catch you next time, next week, on the next Constitutional Talk. Have a good day for now, guys. We'll catch you later. Bye for now, folks.